So what was it that attracted you, do you think, to the United States and the political concerns there? Why away from the UK?
I don't think Britain handles iconoclasts very well, and it particularly doesn't handle bombastic ones. And I think a lot of people with outsized personalities find themselves investigating America as an alternative birth, because I think America has a much higher tolerance for outsized personalities.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty clear that you had some of the characteristics that make people stars, that make people personalities. That was obvious pretty much from the step of the
Well,
first.
this is why I'm not worried in the long term about my career prospects. I had a stratospheric rise over a couple of years and, a painful tumble. But talent is talent, and talent always wins. And I've got 40 years ahead of me, of whatever I choose to do with it. So I'm not worried in the long term about my career prospects at all.
Good. Well, we can talk about your descent and the sort of catastrophe that accompanied it, and maybe about how you see yourself how you see being pulled out of that. I'd like to hear about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what in the world do you think made you so attractive to American Republicans? I mean, this is one of the things that struck me about you right from the beginning, because it's not exactly like you're a poster boy for what you would assume conservative American Republicans would be attracted to. So,
well, I think they quite liked the fact that I was reflecting their views in a package that you would more often think would be a liberal. And of course, I, made that part of the act and part of the brand. It's kind of like, all these things and yet still Republican. But the real answer is joy. There's a joylessness about a lot of conservative activists, authors, and speakers. And there's a joylessness in the intellectual dark web too. It's a very funless place. And I look out at the public intellectuals and commentators and speakers who are currently enjoying a moment in the sun, and each of them is in their own way quite joyless, quite devoid of mirth. And I think that people liked my sense of mischief and they liked the fact that I was always smiling. And I think it's unusual to see somebody talking about really serious things who is the subject of the most extraordinary and relentless abuse, who nonetheless is always smiling. And I have always been that person. I've never stopped, not in 2017, 18, or today. And I think people find that very mesmerizing and very attractive, because...
And very perplexing and difficult to understand, given the circumstances and the apparent seriousness of the topics. I mean, there is something to be said. Because
I think it's to do with, joy is Christianity's great gift to Western civilization. Laughter, the medieval church is, this place of song and of dance. I think Christianity has become quite joyless. The only places where there's a really impassioned, happy spirit of worship is in black churches. But white evangelical Protestantism in the US has become, I think, quite suffocating and joyless. I think the public square as a whole, in general, is a miserable place.
Yeah.
Twitter is a miserable place. If you turn the television on, people are miserable. I think there's something about me, there's something maybe missing in my brain that doesn't get ground down by it. And I'm watching, I had my, moment in the sun. Some other people are having a moment in the sun now. That will, that too will pass. And I'm watching them, and I'm watching them all getting ground down.
That's a real question. It's of interest to me from a psychological perspective. I mean, my suspicions, it's obviously that you're extremely extroverted. I'm not claiming any particular brilliance for noting that, and also that you're extremely open, and that's the creativity dimension. But I'm wondering about your scores on neuroticism. It's like you were subject to a tremendous amount of controversy, and then quite a precipitous fall under strange and complicated circumstances, and you seem to be able to survive that. And you just described yourself as a relatively joyful person. I mean,
I'm a very happy person. I think that listen, I mean, the conservatives are only out and off the playing field when they choose to be, because there's so few of us in such a wide open market. The reason I'm not worried about my prospects in the long term is I still wake up every day with joy in my heart, brimming with energy and ideas. I don't know anybody in public life, not one person in public life, who could have gone through what I went through and not been broken by it. But I'm not. It hasn't beaten me. And I think that that's down to a combination of personal characteristics that I don't think many other people possess. And that's part of that is, not being, it's impossible to intimidate me, for instance. I don't get scared of things. I'm not scared of people. I don't feel, perhaps to the same degree that other people do, embarrassment and shame. So I don't mind playing the fool, playing Falstaff, clowning. I don't mind subverting myself, laughing at myself, because through that I'm able to point to truths that are real and big and beautiful and important. I'm not an egotist, so I don't, and I think that's part of the same thing. I don't mind humbling myself, because I play at having a big ego, but I don't really. And I'm not ground down or broken or upset by things that, that don't matter that much. I mean, I have love in my life. I have achieved more than 99.8% of journalists, political activists, public figures. You and I are the only people who have achieved remotely close to our level of success in our, in the last 10 years worth of libertarian, conservative, IDW, whatever this grand nexus ecosystem is that we both belong to. You and I are the only two people who, you and I are the two who have achieved the greatest success at it. And I've had terrible things happen to me. You're fortunate and nothing bad has really happened to you yet. I can't think of anything really awful that's happened to you aside from the Cambridge thing, which I think that I like.
No, I wouldn't call that. Well,
I think you brought that on yourself, and I don't think it was. I think you brought that on yourself, and I don't think it was too much of a big deal anyway. But nothing really bad has happened to you yet. The worst thing imaginable has happened to me. I had to stand up in front of the world and tell them that I had been sexually abused as a child, and that this was why I'd spoken loosely and incautiously and used a formulation that I regretted about something that had happened to me. And at the same time, try to also say, well, I'm not going to stop making jokes about that or anything else. For other people, I think that level of public ritual humiliation would simply have snapped them. And it didn't me. And I don't know, I mean, you're the psychology expert. Perhaps you have some insight of view on this. The only person I know in my personal life, a friend who has similar qualities, is Ann Coulter, to whom criticism it's a game, and she's able to and the interesting thing is, it's not enough to say that we're, let's say, sociopathic, because quite clearly we're both not. We wouldn't be able to have some of the insights we do, and we wouldn't have the love in our lives that we do if we were sociopathic. So it's not that, but we do both have an ability to just pick things up, put them over there, and not allow them to burrow in and create.
Yeah, well, that seems to me to be that relatively rare combination of extreme extroversion and very low neuroticism. That's not the same as sociopathy.
I think you're right about that. I think maybe that's what I've got.
Some people are just not that affected emotionally by negative events. Some people are devastated by the smallest of obstacles, and some people can roll with punches that would take a normal person out and continue to get back up. And it certainly seems that
things do bother me in my personal life, but they're things that are actually significant, whether it's to do with my family or, my loved one or whatever it is. But there are things that in my brain are emotionally significant, serious things, worthy of unfettered access to my emotions, if you like. Mm-hmm. And they have that. And they produce very strong reactions in both directions. I'm a very passionate person. I can even be hot-headed, when I'm defending somebody I love, for instance. But there's another world, which is the professional world, which is, to me, just a big game. It's a big fun game, and this the reason
This
I
is
just
why I've always thought of
just-
you as a kind of a trickster. You know, I mean,
I think that's part of it.
in sense that you do. There is a game-like element to what you're doing, and
I very much see what I'm doing in life and will be doing for the next 40 years as playing a very complex and very enjoyable game of and very a game of snakes and ladders. And just because I hit a ladder on one of my first turns and then immediately the snake took me back to the front row, it doesn't mean the game is over. In fact, it just means you've learned the rules. So that's, I suppose, why I find it difficult to take too seriously, harrowing introspection about, whatever, because it's not how I apprehend the situation. I can look dispassionately at what happened and why, and we can talk about that, and I have some ideas about that. But I don't have a sort of emotional, I don't have anything to offload about it, really.
Okay. Well, so